One, two, three, four.
So hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. And my name is Dave, and I'm ridiculously excited. We have a big-time guest. Big-time guest. He's an author. He just put out a book called Happy People Are Annoying, which I listened to the whole thing and read some of after I listened to it. His name is Josh Peck. He's a huge Nickelodeon star, huge social media influencer. Welcome to Dopey.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. I'm such a fan.
No way. Stop it.
Yeah, no, I listen to the pod. I mean, I know that it's not a deep cut, but the Artie episode should be like at the Smithsonian.
Did you really listen to that?
Yeah, of course.
That's crazy. That's crazy. You know what turned out was that the sad part is that Artie episode, I'm like Bert Kreischer. I'm having you on the show, and now I'm going to talk about myself.
Please do.
I'm going to do it very little. But that was the last time I got to see Chris alive, right? After that, we took the ferry home, and I never saw him again. And him and Artie were wasted, and I was sober trying to get through that podcast. Like, crazy. But how did you, I mean, like, the guy who got me in touch with you told me you listened. I was like, he didn't listen, but I'm shocked.
No, I did. And I remember, I mean, I think because I was sort of introduced to the podcast, I don't know how I discovered it. And then the Artie episode was sort of the one that jumped out because I'm a big Howard fan, a big Artie fan. And then I remember when you made the announcement that Chris had overdosed, I was like, because I guess you listen to a podcast like this, but any interaction with a fellow alcoholic addict, you just know that right underneath the surface, there's this possibility that they could fall to this fucking disease. And so hearing that was so heartbreaking. And yet on some level, you're not totally surprised whenever you hear that, right?
Right. If I heard that Artie died, I wouldn't have been surprised. But when Chris died, I didn't believe it. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like, if I heard that you died, if I heard that somebody died that I wasn't talking to on a daily basis, like, I would be like, of course, yeah, I get it. But when it was somebody who, you know, they tell you something, right? You talk to them every day, and I guess I believed everything he told me, and his girlfriend called me that he died, and I talked to him the night before. I did not believe it, even though what you're saying is true, that as addicts, the check's in the mail kind of thing, but he was in recovery for almost 5 years at that point, you know? So it's like,
My buddy always says, never be surprised when an alcoholic or an addict goes out and drinks or uses. Be surprised when they stay sober.
right. No, I get it. I get it. It's crazy. I have to say, I listened to your book, and it took me I loved it. First of all, I loved your book. I think even though you weren't some horrible in the gutter, needles in your arm, heroin addict, or you don't convey that in the book, your whole thing is just rife with addiction and recovery, and it's an amazing addiction recovery book, even though it's not like crazy junkie memoir.
You make a great point. I mean, I think because I got sober in a room that was so against the drunk log I've listened to the pod. I haven't listened to enough episodes to totally know. Like, do we talk assuming that everyone knows our secret language, or should I sort of qualify what a drunk log is?
Everybody knows, but I want you to feel free. I bet because there's a bunch of mothers listening and girlfriends and normies who are voyeurs, and I bet you a lot of just Josh Peck fans who want to hear you explain it. So go for it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a drunk log is when you go to a 12-step meeting, a recovery meeting, it can, in many rooms, be on trend to really tell these rough stories and to stay more in the time of how it was. And basically it gets to a certain point where people will sort of say like, we're actually not so interested in your drunk story. We kind of want to know how you got sober and what you're doing today to stay sober. And there's all different meetings. And I know early on, I loved hearing stories like that. It's why I can't watch Intervention anymore, because it's like it's
It's
too
right.
much of my past. Like I want to see people doing well. Like
It's
I
funny.
want.
No, because
Sorry,
I used to watch Intervention and Using, and you want to see them like not go, or you want to see them fuck it up. And then like my wife is a social worker, she's obsessed with Intervention and just being in somewhat long-term recovery. Like I'm coming up on 7 years, to see somebody with a needle or smoking meth or shooting up. It's so graphic. I'm just like, probably shouldn't watch it. You know what I mean? Not that it's triggering. It just does something weird to me. You know what I mean? It's just like, it affects me. What I mean, like when and for the stories, I'm into the stories for the comedy, for the ride, the excitement. Like I still love that. That's why we started the show, because like we liked making each other laugh with the stories. You know what I mean? So like,
Yes.
in terms of your own personal, and I always thought it was funny when you went to a meeting and they say drug-a-log instead of drunk-a-log, because they're trying to like make it work. But I remember in the book you said that you wound up in a really hardcore men's meeting. Is that where they were like, no drunk-a-logging?
Yeah, they weren't super interested. I mean, this was the kind of meeting with guys who had long-term sobriety. And when you walked into that meeting, they basically were like, sit down, shut up, and listen. Like, take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. Your best thinking got you a front row seat in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you really have nothing to say. Like, I know you think you do, but you really have nothing to say. Just be quiet, and when the meeting's over, stack chairs and go clean the coffee pot. And if you really have something that's eating at you, find one of us in the parking lot. We would be more than happy to take you aside and really hear what's going on. But while the meeting's going on, just try to take some pearls of wisdom from people who have walked this path before you. And, they were very much about, because it was an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, about whenever you talked, you had to only talk about alcohol. Now, the assumption was they had this saying like, asking if an alcoholic also did drugs is like asking a prostitute if she also gives hand jobs. Like, it's assumed. But but their whole thing was like, if somebody came in here and was like a traditional old school drunk who had no interest in drugs, and they heard everyone only talking about drugs, they might not identify. So to honor the original sort of conception of this thing, and because there are other meetings that are completely narcotic based, if that's your thing, that exists as well, we're just going to talk about alcohol.
Was it Pacific Group?
No.
No, it was just a hardcore old school AA meeting. This morning I went to an AA meeting. I went to a 12-step meeting on the beach. Like I go to these beach meetings. I live in Long Island, and every morning at 8 they do a meeting, and it was the first tradition meeting they ever had this morning, right? And like, it's because it's on the beach. Like, they don't have the traditions hanging anywhere. They don't have the steps hanging anywhere. Like, it's a little bit of a loosey-goosey meeting, and this kind of old-timer with 30 years is sitting back, and he's like, it's about time we did a tradition meeting. Who knows where the money we collect goes? You don't have the traditions on the walls. We're a little bit lax, and people are getting pissed, but it's like I say I'm an alcoholic and I'm a drug addict because I barely drank, but I shouldn't. To honor the tradition would be I'm an alcoholic. I just say it because I know there's a kid in that meeting who's a drug addict, who's maybe uncomfortable about being at an AA meeting. You know what I mean? And I just want, I'm just going to say it, AA saved my life. I was barely drinking, but I'm an alcoholic, and AA saved my life. And I love the way you talk about AA in the book. But when I read the book, I find it to be, and your life story, such an addiction story. and also I love that you're a Jew from New York City, because I'm a Jew from New York City. I grew up in Chelsea. You grew up in Hell's Kitchen.
Yes.
And you came into the world in a rough situation, like it's a situation you don't hear about very often.
Yeah, I mean, I was born, my mom had been in and out of the rooms since she was 28 years old, mostly in. Her thing is food. And so that is a totally different beast, just because if you had to sort of dole out your dose of whiskey or heroin every day, but in just small amounts, I imagine that would be an incredibly tough thing to navigate. But thankfully, she was sort of like very close and in the program for my entire life. And so when I was born, much of my life was spent in church basements and at Cabrini Hospital and at all these different like places all over the city. And I would sit and play Game Boy and watch these people have a meeting. And then I just knew they were obsessed with Chinese food. That these friends of my mom's, like, they really like to talk about drugs and alcohol and food, but then they really love to finish the night with some chicken and broccoli.
They love eating at the end. But I mean, just the situation with your dad growing, I mean, like, how much do you think your addiction, alcoholism, I mean, and probably, did you think you're a food addict or no?
I think actually, like, it's funny. I found a way. It's like a guy who can smoke one or two cigarettes, like, and maintain.
Well, you have to eat, right? You have to eat. What are you going to do? You
got to eat. And I actually can, like, I'll black out and eat, 5 Krispy Kremes, once a week. But for the most part, yeah, I've figured out a way to manage food. And I've seen what true food addiction is and sort of the remedy to that, which is weighing and measuring or having a proper sponsor and turning your food over every day. And I think I might have avoided that one. But it was my first foray into overdoing things, because I have an alcoholic brain from as far back as I can remember. And for most of us, food is the first option in narcotizing what's going on inside.
Narcotizing?
It's a good one. Look up that word. That's anesthetize, narcotize.
I never heard
That's my rap
narcotize.
name, Little Narcotize.
Is that right?
No.
All right. So, but like the story with your dad, you know what I mean? That you were conceived in basically a crazy one night stand business dinner at I work at Katzs Deli at a rival.
You work there now?
I've worked there 14 years. I'm coming to the end of my road at Katz's. Yes.
I'm so honored. We have so much to talk about. I don't know if it's right for this podcast, but yes. Oh man.
Ask me anything before we get to the horrible story of your father at 62 knocking up your mother at 46. Ask me anything real quick. Ask me anything. What do you want to know?
I'm not trying to get away from the fact that my father wanted nothing to do with me from jump, but when you lose your ticket at Katz's, how much do you got to pay?
$50. Well, you got choices. Do you want to hear your choices? You can get into a horrible fight and have your teeth knocked out and then get arrested, or you can be really cool and compliant. Like, I was a waiter at Katz's for 10 years, and people lost their tickets every day. And I would say, I'd see someone fighting, I'd take them aside and I would say, go limp, go with this. Do what they ask. We'll get you out of here as easily as possible. If the person is drunk, they like lose their fucking mind and they need to step to everybody. I've seen lots of people get hit at Katz's by people at Katz's. I've seen people get locked in. Like, I've seen the security guard being like, that's it, locks everybody in, calls the cops. But I've also seen more than that. A customer who's upset, it's scary. You lose the ticket. Everyone's like, where's the ticket? And the customer is upset and he's like, I don't know what happened. And if he's cool, we walk them through the process and they can get out without paying just by being cool. Usually we find the ticket. It's in the kitchen. Right. It's under the fucking card. It's stuck to the bottom of a plate.
It's got to be somewhere.
It's got to be. I hate the fucking ticket. Oh my God. The ticket.
It's such a dumb thing, but it's it's a vestige of what it once was. No, is Katz's still 24 hours?
No. Katz's was 24 hours Friday and Saturday until COVID. And then now I think we're open till 11. We're about to go 24/7 again. I waited tables at Katz's. I worked at Katz's when I was a senior in high school, a freshman in college. Then I had a little career in TV, became a heroin addict, became a methadone addict, moved to California, lost most of my life. And then my mother was dying, and I came home, and my cousin owned half of Katz's, and I asked him if I could work there, and he said yes. When I was 34, I started working at Katz's just off of heroin. I knocked my wife up later that year. My mother died that year, and I thought I wasn't going to make it to Christmas, and now it's 14 years later. And I'm still there. I got sober there. I relapsed there. I was a manager. I was a waiter for 11 years, and now I run catering. But let's talk about you. This is not the Bert Kreischer podcast.
No, this is fascinating. I'm telling you, the people love this. But now knowing that you're part of the Katz's family, I'm not asking specifics, but is the place a goddamn printing press for money?
I would have to say, of course. You know,
it does great. Well, I mean, I don't think it's any surprise that Katz's Deli has been around as long as it's been, and it's doing great. But I mean, that corner, and then you got Russ and Daughters right there. I mean, it's Jew paradise.
When's the last time you were at Katz's?
Oh, I have a very quick Katz's story. So I was doing this little indie in New York. It was 2015, and my wife, who was my girlfriend sorry,
what was the movie?
It's called Chronically Metropolitan. It's with Mary Louise Parker. Just this little New York indie. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, comes to visit me. And, she's a California girl from Sacramento, even though her roots are New York from Bay Ridge. And so I'm like, I'll take you to Katz's. Like, you'll have the full experience. And she's like, well, I just want a grilled cheese. I'm like, grilled cheese? What are we talking about here? And so I go up to the guy. And I'm like, can you do a grilled cheese? He's like looking at me like, yeah, I could do a grilled cheese. And I'm like, and I don't know, maybe you could throw on some avocado. And he looks at me and goes, avocado?
Yeah.
Like I might as well said caviar.
Yes. No, I mean, in the old days when we were kids, I got a job there trying to set up delivery, and me and my best friends worked there. And I was like, they would pay us in sandwiches. So I was like, and that was when it was Jews still worked there. You know what I'm saying? It was like 1991 or something, and Jews still worked there. And I'm like, and they're like, what do you want? And I'm like, and it's me and my two Jewish friends, but the two of us are more Jewish than the third. So I'm like, let me get a pastrami on rye. And my next friend is like, let me get a pastrami on rye. And the third friend goes, I'll have turkey on white with lettuce and tomato. And the guy's like, get the fuck out of here. And it was a classic moment, And when you're a Jew,
of a Gentile palate.
Of course. And when you're a Jew from California, it is a pilgrimage to go to the source, right? When's the last time you were at Katz's?
It's good. Yeah, I mean, in LA we have Langers, which there is sort of now a debate. I mean, maybe there is no debate, but certain people do have opinions.
I waited on the owner of Langers once at Katz's, and he's bragging about his double baked bread or whatever the Langers thing was. And I was like, yeah, bring us some of the bread and we'll make a sandwich for you. Because like Langers does have better bread. I will go down saying that, but nobody has, it's the meat, right? Right. I think a Langers Katz's combination would be awesome with that double baked bread. I'm into it.
Could you imagine? Maybe you guys meet up halfway, like in
St.
Kansas.
Louis. Yeah.
St. Louis.
City. Right.
Do the ultimate pop-up.
That would be fucking wild, right? That would be wild.
Oh my God. Oh, I would fly in.
Where are you in California?
I'm in LA. I'm on the west side of LA, and actually my wife and I just bought a place down at the beach. So we're moving in a couple months.
Nice. We might do a pop-up in Beverly Hills. If we do the pop-up, I'll let you know. I'll get you.
Oh my gosh, I'd love it. I bet I know some of the people that I know a lot of food podcasters, food people in the LA scene. So yeah, let's keep chatting.
Also, if you want to do anything, I'll ship you stuff if you want to do any weird Katz's shipping YouTube stuff.
Mukbang?
Whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do.
Might
but
be
let's
a
stop
dream.
talking. This can't be about Katz's. You're a big star. Josh Peck, fucking internet sensation. I know. I'm glad I dazzled you with. Nobody cares. Like I had the dude, the dude from Men at Work, Colin Hay.
Yeah.
So you had him on at the end. I'm like, why don't you come to New York and I'll get you a pastrami sandwich? He's like, no, thank you. And like,
No.
I offer people, and sometimes they don't know what it is. So the fact that you're so excited, it's like, I appreciate that. It's mishpucha.
No, these things mean a lot to me. And again, this is so a 14-year guy sober, 7-year guy sober conversations, like these are the things that really get us off nowadays.
Well, what gets me off is that people like of your stature have such a beautiful place for old time New Yorkness and Katzs itself. And obviously, if you're from Manhattan, it's like there's something in the DNA of not. It's funny because you grew up in Manhattan and I grew up in Manhattan. How many people do you meet? They're like, I didn't know anyone grew up in Manhattan. And you're like, well, everybody I know grew up in Manhattan. So it's like, it seems weird to somebody not from there. How, like, now that you don't live there, do you miss it? Like, what is your take on being a Manhattanite out in the world in general?
It's interesting. I left when I was 14. And so a lot of my adolescence was spent in North Hollywood, which I'm glad was sort of like this weird West Coast shtetl version of what I was growing up in New York. It wasn't like I went from Hell's Kitchen to Santa Monica. And I had a real affinity for New York for a long time. And then it was sort of that weird mid-aughts Bloomberg time where I'd come back to New York and I'd just be like, what is this place? Like, I don't recognize it. And now at 35, I realize how much of my DNA, I mean, I'm a typical Jewish story. Like, my grandmother was walking on the Lower East Side at 8 years old with no shoes. Like, she, moved from Poland. My grandfather was from Russia, and they were Jews on the Lower East Side, and then they moved to Jersey. And my mom, when she realized she was having a kid, was like, I want to raise my kid in the best city in the world. So I feel so New York in my DNA, even though I haven't lived there for 20 years.
Well, you can't shake it. And how related to your alcoholicness or drug addictness do you think the single mother was to you? Like, I mean, like when you write about it, you write both sides. You write about longing for a father figure. You talk about that a lot, but you also kind of like, you kind of New York it. You're like, I'm okay. You know what I mean? And you make fun of the longing at the same time, but I'm sure the trauma informed your alcoholicness, right?
Well, I want to give a double answer to that, but I want to ask you first, because I'm not totally clear on it. Like, it's like they say in some of the writing of AA, or they don't say it in the writing, but you hear it in meetings, from Penn State to the state pen and from Park Avenue to the park bench, right? Like, it's not just environmental. It's not just circumstance. And like, my best friend in the world is in recovery, and his brother, who seemingly had the same upbringing, same parents, same everything, just isn't affected. So as much to your point as I'm sure my father, single mom, deep financial insecurity, growing up 100 pounds overweight, had allowed for me to have a proclivity towards addiction. Is some of it just set in our genetics? I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, like, I grew up in Manhattan in a stable family. My parents were both teachers. They were married until my mother died of leukemia. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up in like super bucolic middle class, and like in the public housing in Chelsea. Like, if you had like a suburban version of Manhattan, I grew up in it, and still I became this horrible drug addict. But so I agree with you. Like, and I'm thinking about going to a hypnotist and like bobbing for apples for trauma, like doing a regression to see what the fuck happened. I'm kind of scared, but I agree with you because, like you, I was addicted to television at an early age. I wasn't 100 pounds overweight, but in my mind I was. I was probably 10 pounds overweight, 15 pounds overweight, but in my head I was 100 pounds overweight. I had the exact same experience that you describe without having that weight. And I swear when I read about you, like discovering comedy at 8, right? 8, 9, right? I it's funny how envious I am of your misfortune and how you took your misfortune and really channeled it into a really cool story. You know what I mean? Like you went for it I mean, you became the hero in your story at age 9, 10. Fucking, it's crazy. Tell the story. Tell the Dopey Nation what happened to you, please.
I mean, yeah, basically, I was 8 years old, and my mom and I would sort of split time between Florida and New York because it's easier to be broke in Florida. And I, like every other Jewish person, had a grandparent who was in Boca. So we'd go and sort of dry out in Boca for a year or so, and then we'd come back to the city. I'm 8 years old, and I start looking at Backstage Magazine, which is sort of the preeminent acting newspaper at that time. And I don't even know how I got my hands on
Yeah,
it.
how do you think that happened? Do you think, like, that's the thing, like, when before I read the book, I just figured your mom was like an aspiring stage mom, but it seems like you were more interested in accomplishing something than she was. How do you think you got the Backstage Magazine?
I'm sure she maybe picked it up for me the way a parent would like grab a comic book for their kid. I think in Florida, I was doing, at 7 years old, I was doing dinner theater. I was in the Music Man, getting paid $16 a week, having one line, doing 8 performances a week in Boca at 7. So
That's amazing.
obviously she saw something.
She saw you wanted to do it, and you describe that was it Passover that you spit the joke? Like, you don't say what the joke is. Do you remember the joke that changed your life?
It was something pertaining to breast enlargement. It
Nice.
was not totally obscene, but colorful, and certainly something an 8 year old shouldn't be telling. But my mom was like this. I mean, my mom is 77. So she was born in the 40s. So growing up, I remember kids would ask their parents about Woodstock or something cool that happened in the 70s. And my mom would be like, no, 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 I'm all about Streisand and Manilow. Like that's way after my time. And so my mom was shticky and vaudevillian and loved musical theater and loved stand up. So I was just doing kind of an impression of her. But suddenly, in this body, with her delivery, along with like picking up the rhythms of the Fresh Prince of Bel Air and Billy Madison and Ace Ventura, I kind of won over this crowd at Passover dinner, and I found my own emotional afikoman that night, my friend.
Nice. Very, very nice. And it must have been like a lightning bolt to the pleasure center of your brain when you get that first laugh and acceptance and love, right?
Oh my gosh, the flood of dopamine! It was like it was revelatory.
And it puts you, I mean, and it's like, I'm not one, when I asked you before about the trauma informing your alcoholism, I totally agree with your answer. But it's like, if we want to look at this, like, and it puts you on the hunt, you know what I mean, for validation, for love, for acceptance, for all that shit. And it's, it's probably, it's pre-social media, and you're getting the likes professionally, and you became a 10-year-old stand-up comedian, which in my head I was like, I should have done that when I was 10. Like, what were my
Right.
parents fucking doing? But like, it worked out, and you did Conan O'Brien, you did Rosie O'Donnell, and obviously you were good. You had crazy chutzpah, right?
I had crazy chutzpah, and I also was sort of like I had blinders on because at that point I had this perfect combination of I was already coming into the situation where people were giving me a little they were giving me a wide berth, let's just say, not just because I was fat, because I was a kid trying. So people were already inclined to want me to win. But then I had a strong 5 minutes, and I knew that, like most comedians who would get up and work out material on stage, I couldn't do that. I didn't have any references. I couldn't do crowd work. So it had like this 5 to 8 minutes that I had drilled down and rehearsed in front of my mom every night for months. So it wasn't a surprise to me that it got laughs because I knew it worked.
Yeah, it's incredible. I just love the story. Like I really do. And that translated to this whole Nickelodeon world. Right? How did it go? What was the first stop? With Amanda Bynes was the first stop?
Yeah, I basically would audition at Nickelodeon, which was located at 1515 Broadway in Times Square, like every
When
other
I
day.
was in high school, I was an intern at MTV. So I
Uh-huh.
was at 1515 every day.
38th floor.
I don't remember. I just remember we can get free soda. I like getting free soda. Me
Yes.
and my best friend would wander the halls. Kurt Loder would be like smoking weed and listening to The Harder They Come. And we'd be like, yo, what's going on? And like, we felt like we were cool. You know what I mean? But so like when you talk about 1515, again, I could relate. And you pressed up against this Nickelodeon executive and you're like, I want to be on the biggest show. And he's like, come to California, kid.
Well, I basically would audition all the time, and I would go into Nickelodeon saying, listen, I'm young, chubby, and funny. Like, you need me.
Right.
And they were like, well, maybe, but let's see. And I slowly did commercials and then guest spots on TV shows. And I booked this Chevy Chase, Chris Elliott movie called Snow Day. And I'm 12 years old. I remember on a Friday night, my agent calls my mom. She's like, he got the movie. And my mom's like, he got the movie? And she's like,
Amazing.
yeah, hope your passports are, valid because you're going to Canada next week. And she's like, we don't have passports. So we go to Canada, and one day I'm just talking shit to this nice guy with a great laugh. And my mom sort of sidles up to me, being the good Jewish mother she is. And she's like, yo, do you know who that is? That's the president of Nickelodeon. Tell him you want to be on All That, which was like SNL for kids. And I told him, and 9 months later, he called me and said, I'm flying you and your mom to California to go star on the Amanda Show.
Right. And I've had a bunch of ex-child stars on Dopey.
Yeah.
The only people I can think of right now is Mackenzie Phillips for some reason from One Day at a Time. And when she was 14, she was like freebasing coke or something. You know, like the child star tends to go hard and fast, and that wasn't your story with it, right? I mean, like how quickly were people?
Well,
Please,
I guess if you disqualify the food, right? Because it was right around 14 that I went from maybe 220 pounds to 300. So if we're saying that
No, let's
food
not
and drugs,
disqualify. Let's not
yeah,
disqualify the food. Let's for before we even move on, let's talk about the food at that point. Like I never talk about food addiction. Like we never talk about food addiction on Dopey. And everyone's like, you should talk about more different kinds of addiction. So as a 14 or a 15-year-old, like, are you a food addict? You're medicating something, right? Like how, when you look back at it, like, what do you remember?
I just remember that I was lying and cheating and stealing from as far back as I can remember. That I was a kid who would go to someone's house and I would see fruit snacks in their cupboard and I'd be like, you seem to have a surplus of gushers, so I'm going to help myself. So literally what would eventually become, for many people rooting through someone's medicine cabinet, it was me in your pantry, sort of subtly grabbing things and throwing them in my pockets. And then as I got older and I had access to food, just because I'd walk to school by myself, so I'd go to my local bodega and get a bacon, egg, and cheese and chips and like a 20-ounce. Uh, we had a not PC name for these sodas that we used to drink, but I'll just say they were very generic.
What was it? It was like
It was like an
RC.
RC cola or something, just something super generic.
Okay, I got.
And
I'm with you. I'm with you.
and
I
it was
support you.
overflowing. Like this is the 90s, and I'm sure there are a bunch of 10-year-olds who aren't proud of it, but and it had 50 grams of sugar, and I would just crush that on my way to school. So yeah, it was sort of it was definitely my first foray into overdoing things.
But in the book, you definitely don't describe yourself as a food addict. You describe yourself overweight. You describe yourself, you kind of come down very hard on yourself, but you don't talk about food addiction, which I think is interesting because everything you're describing is the hallmark of utter addiction. Lying,
Right.
cheating, stealing, overdoing it, living for it. And then the shame, you talked about waking up with a sugar hangover, waking up with knowing that you overdid it. And then even worse, doing it on camera. Like how difficult was that?
Yeah, I think I was just balancing this idea that in many ways I was living this life beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, I got out of New York. I got on the show I dreamed of. I was getting the validation I had so sought my whole life. And yet, in the same respect, I was introducing myself to the world in this body that I wasn't comfortable in. And I knew that I would have to transform in front of everyone, and somehow inherently knew that some people wouldn't be okay with that.
Well, at what point are you like, because I don't think I really got the gist of this. How similar was getting thin to getting sober?
Totally. You know what? It was, I guess the thing that they had in common was the idea of a bottom, that I had to bottom in both areas to try it someone else's way, to realize that my way wasn't working. So pain was an incredibly great motivator in both scenarios, but getting thin, that was utter self-will. That was, I did it at the right time between 17 and 18 when your body naturally wants to shed that kind of weight. And yeah, and I was certainly some self-will run riot. I was working off the fumes of my ego, going, once I lose this weight, I'm going to be a handsome movie star, and that's what's going to make me all better.
Right. That's very deep. And I also love like the way you talk about it's like, how'd you do it? How'd you lose the weight? And you're like, how anybody does. I exercised and I ate less and the weight came off over a long period of time. Right.
Yes.
What do you remember a bottom? Do you remember when you were like, I need to fucking change around food?
Yeah, I remember I was 17 and I was in New York because we would come back from LA every year for a month and just spend time in the city, see friends and family. And I remember I had this, I talk about it in the book. My mom and I were driving cross country because taking a plane would just be too typical for the Pecks. And I was just espousing some vitriol, some angry tirade about men in my life and my father. And my mom looked at me and she's like, Josh, you're angry.
I remember the
And
story. You were in Texas, I think, or Oklahoma or something.
yeah,
Keep going.
exactly.
Yes, keep going.
And my mom was like, you're angry. And that kind of anger is never going to serve you. And I'm your mom. I'll always love you. But when people see this side of you, they're going to run for the hills. And it burst this bubble. I don't know the deep effect it had, but that summer I started to lose weight. And I think it was contingent on that moment that it confirmed the data that was I was angry and I was uncomfortable and I was probably eating because of that. And if I didn't let go of this thing, I would never be able to get healthy.
It's amazing because to give that up, and it's not long after that you're taking your first drugs, right?
It was probably about a year. Yeah, because I got down from 300 to about 200 pounds. And I
How
remember
tall are you?
thinking,
How tall are
6
you?
feet.
Okay.
And I just remember, thinking, okay, it's time. And I'd always been asked to go to places, parties or whatever. And I was like, no, 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 I'm going to stay home and alphabetize my DVDs. Like, I just don't feel comfortable. But once I lost all that weight, I thought, when I get invited the next time, I'm going to go. And there were some kids at the apartment complex where I grew up, and they were like, we're going to go to this house party. And that was the night that changed my life because I was suddenly with this crew of kids that were very typical. They did drugs, they went out, they drank, and I was like, oh, I want to do everything they're doing.
And did anyone ever offer it to you before then? Like you're a 16-year, I mean, like you're 16, you're a TV star. Like, did you keep to yourself? Was anyone like, try Coke, drink with me? Were there groupies? Like pre losing the weight, like you had that crazy alcoholic addict self-hatred in the fat body, and you thought you couldn't go out or something, right? You weren't, because like, other kids who might have been overweight would be out doing all sorts of crazy shit, but you stayed in until then, right? Until you lost the weight.
I did, but I remember I had medicine till I was 18, till I lost the weight. I had my medicine and food.
Right.
So it wasn't triggered. And it's a great question because I remember like the summers I would come back to New York, me and my buddies would go stand on my friend's roof. He lived on Grand and Center, and we would smoke a blunt. And it was nothing. It was so unmemorable. It was years that had passed that I had to be reminded that I would do that a couple times every summer when I would come home, because like that addictive part of me was not triggered yet. So it was like an innocuous experience.
That's interesting. So then it was the party, and it was Coke the first time that it really like was like, holy shit, maybe this is me. This is the answer to my problem.
No, it was the girl doing cocaine that I was like, oh my gosh, I so want this girl to like me. And she was nice to me. And she was adorable. And I had never really even kissed a girl other than like a random game of spin the bottle here and there. So the fact that she liked me and she did it, I wanted to do anything that was, that I thought would be impressive or just cool to her.
I think that's interesting in itself that you had been a big TV star and never had kissed a girl. Because of it was, I'm sure girls would have kissed you. It had to have been a self-hatred thing, right?
It was
It had
me.
to-
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the first drug that you fell for?
I remember that she was doing cocaine and she offered it to me. And I remember thinking like, oh, I've only like, no, that can't be. Like I've seen that in Pulp Fiction, but it doesn't, people don't do that. And then she offered it to me and I said no. But I remember my mind wrote a rain check that night that under the right circumstance, I'd say yes. And a couple of nights later, she offered it to me again. And I remember doing it with her. And I didn't think about a thing about how it would affect me or what I would feel or the risk. I just wanted to make sure she was watching.
Right. And then I love the way you described it that night, because you're like, the Coke didn't even fucking do anything, but then I went to the greatest party I ever went to, and I had the
That's
best
right.
time I've ever had. And it's like, holy shit, it's the drugs. And it's like, I love the way you describe that. And when the switch went on in your head, like what, I'm also interested in this. You were smoking blunts years before, but the stoner thing didn't flick in your head like that. Did the stoner thing ever catch up after the Coke?
Yeah, I because that months prior to that, I was hanging out with a bunch of buddies, and we would like play poker or just kind of hang out at night, and we just became more common. But it just seemed manageable, like, and it didn't have the same energy as those other things. So I assumed it it was just something that didn't have much of a hold over me. But in hindsight, I probably was playing a lot more poker and smoking that summer leading up to that moment. I don't think I let a lot of days go by that I wasn't playing poker.
Right. No, I get it. I want to read a great quote from your book. There was a great quote because I was listening to your book. I walked to Katzs. I rode on the Long Island Railroad listening to your book. I walked to Katzs is listening to your book, and I heard you say this line, and I texted it to myself, kind of putting it in my head that I was gonna go back and find it. And the first half of the line, and this is so fucking annoying because I loved it. It was like the first half of the line was, it was like, Now it's gone. It's so amazing how my life works. It was like I was a fat loser and now I'm a drug user or something. It was something about thinking that you were a fat loser, and now you're just this drug user guy. And I went back and bought the book. I went to the Strand. Strand doesn't have your book. Fucking, I don't know what's going on. Got to get into the Strand. Barnes and Noble's on the wall, right? You're right on the wall in Barnes and Noble's.
Shout out BNN.
Shout out Barnes and Noble's. And I couldn't find the quote I was looking for, but I found this. I'd finally found a kind of medicine that night. It was a medicine I'd been searching for my entire life, a cure that allowed me to be me. Not the me that was worried about what you thought. It was the me I had always wanted to project. Someone so effortlessly cool and secure that I couldn't be bothered by my past. I have no past. Present, here and now, I don't make apologies because there's nothing to apologize for. Life is good, and so am I. The lie we tell ourselves is, as I am not enough. Well, that night, I was enough. And, that's the stuff right there. It's happening right here. Look at you.
That's it.
That's good
That's
stuff.
it.
What was it like once you had switched the switch?
I spent the next 4 years on sort of a nonstop vision quest. I talk about it in the book. I took that deep breath that I'd always been searching for.
That was my other quote. Should I read the deep breath quote? Oh, I had
Sure.
that. I wrote that one down in my book. Part of my lungs were unlocked and I could finally take a deep breath.
I love it.
All right, I'm with you. But what were the drugs that caught your attention? Like, what was the 4 years fucking vision quest? Were you like on a ton of psychedelics? Were you freebasing fucking meth? Were you putting LSD in your eye, liquid LSD, Visine? What were you doing?
Like, I mean, I know this is a dopey podcast.
No, go as far as you're willing to go. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
No, I just, like I said, I'm so conditioned to not, because it's not about one particular thing or the other. But I guess I would just say, like, I tried it all. I love that Robin Williams quote. I was on everything but skates. And
I'm sure he was on skates too, but yeah.
But it basically was just kind of like whatever was around. Like, I wasn't, I didn't discriminate. It was just more about getting out of self. And it usually started most days with weed, that I would just wake up and get stoned. And then it was just sort of like, then everything was there was, I threw caution to the wind, and it was nonstop for 4 years.
In, I want to say in 2000 and what year did the Wackness come out? 2007?
2008.
In 2008 was when I left Los Angeles and I moved to Burlington, and I had just gotten off of methadone. I'd been on methadone for 7 years, and I was in bad pain, and I was smoking crazy weed still. I was a crazy stoner, and the Wackness had just come out, and I moved to Burlington, and I looked at that movie, and I looked at you in that movie, and I saw me. And me as a kid, I was not like the character Luke in that movie. Like I wasn't a big drug dealer. I had a lot of friends. I wasn't disenfranchised like Luke, but I wore an army jacket and I lived in Manhattan and I liked hip hop. And it just spoke to me and it kept me company. And I think you nailed the New York City estranged stoner so well. And I was so fucking mental when I saw that movie, but it brought me home. So like, I really appreciate that you're on the show and that you did that. You know what I mean? Like personally, it was something that really resonated with me.
Oh, I'm honored. I mean, I remember when I auditioned for that movie, I was 20 years old. And during that time, I was constantly going against Michael Cera and Jonah Hill or Miles Teller. And I would see them walk into an audition. I'd be like, have fun, guys. Like, you're going to kill it. Like, good job. I'll bow out now. Like, I know when I'm beat. But when this script came about, and it's about this sort of drug addicted, insecure kid in New York who's obsessed with hip hop and trading marijuana for therapy in 1994, I thought, I might be uniquely qualified to play this guy. I might understand him just a little bit differently than everyone else. And so it just was one of those moments where I was like, I think I'm this guy. And when I got the part, and then it was with Sir Ben Kingsley, my favorite actor, like I got to start playing with Michael Jordan, like my personal Michael Jordan. It made no sense, and yet it made all the sense.
I love Ben Kingsley, but I don't like his New York accent. Like I think his New
Really?
York. I don't like his New York accent. He did it in what was the mob movie where he does the New York accent? He does that. He
Oh,
does it.
and he's in recovery.
Which is that? Which one is that? I know.
Well,
I'm thinking.
there's
I think
the
there
one
was
with Luke
two.
Wilson and Taya Leone.
Was he wasn't in Once Upon a Time in New York. No. He wasn't in that. But I know he was in yeah, I think it was the one with Luke Wilson. And I think in Sexy Beast he does the New York accent too, I think.
No, no, that's like a deep, like Cockney,
Okay.
like
Yeah, I fucking
yeah,
don't
yeah,
remember.
yeah.
But he had some other movie. I don't like his New York accent. You know what Ben
Searching for
Kingsley
Bobby Fischer.
I never watched. I was too strung out during
Oh,
the
it's good
searching.
shit.
I know. I
Good
heard you right.
movie.
I heard you talk about that movie. I like him in Sneakers, but that's the kind of. Did you ever see Sneakers with Robert
Yeah,
Redford?
classic. Sidney
Yeah,
Poitier.
yeah, that's a fucking classic idiots movie. Like that's my kind of movie. But you didn't get sober for fucking. You dried out for the Wackness, but you didn't get sober at that point, right?
No, I would just smoke pot at night with the crew, but I wasn't doing anything else because I knew this was like a huge opportunity, and somehow I was able to sort of keep it at bay for the 6 weeks of filming.
And what about Method Man? Did you get high with Method Man?
No, and that's what kills me. Actually, I must have. I must have. Maybe I must have. Because I was smoking pot during that time of my life, and who better to do it with?
I'm hoping that you shotgunned a blunt into Method Man's mouth. How did you find what brought you to the end of using?
Well,
Like
it's
what was the
it's.
bottom?
I'm happy we're sort of talking about the whackness now. I mean, there were so many bottoms, and in recovery, you hear these cinematic moments where people are on train tracks waiting for the train to hit them, and God intervenes somehow. But for me, I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was setting my life on fire. I was getting a bad reputation. I was putting my health in jeopardy, and really my eventually my safety, and I was breaking my mom's heart on a regular basis, which I know is corny, but I knew that she had been in the room since she was 28. So she uniquely knew what was going on with me in maybe a way that another parent wouldn't. But I think what really stood out was the Wackness went to Sundance, which was my dream. And I was 21 and I was just an actor amongst actors, which had been my dream. I didn't want to be the funny fat guy. I didn't want to be a kid actor. I just wanted to be amongst my fellows. And I've got this movie that's there and it's screening in this huge theater, and Quentin Tarantino's there and my hero Ben Kingsley's there. And I go to bed that night as these incredible reviews are coming in, and I think I'm going to wake up tomorrow and that shitty committee, that voice that wakes up before me every morning and tells me all the reasons why I'll never be enough or why nothing's going to work out, it won't be there. I'll wake up a new guy. Like I did it. I'm at the finish line. And I woke up the next morning and that voice was still there. And it confirmed my worst suspicion, right? That I had tried food, I tried drugs and alcohol. I even tried prestige and career success, and nothing could fill that hole in the soul. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to leave. And I get a flight out that day, and everyone's screaming at me. They're like, no one gets to do this. No one has a hit movie that they're the star of at this festival, and you're leaving. But I was literally crawling out of my own skin with this new information swimming around my head. And 2 weeks later, I got sober.
That's amazing because like nothing being enough, right? Nothing being
Nothing.
enough. But you, I mean, like, I think there is no one size fits all of addiction or recovery or anything. It's like, thank God you didn't go digging deeper. You were like, I'm fucking done. And then you saw, like, maybe some of the language as a kid in a meeting was like, the solution exists. You know what I mean? Like when I got sober, it was because I remembered in the back of my head that I could stop being obsessive. Like that obsession could cease. Like I was just so obsessed, not even with drugs at the end. I was obsessed with because I had lost my family, and I was so obsessed with that. But that echo of of an end to obsessive thinking, I was like, I need to find that. What was the thing that the siren sound of 12 step that called you at the end? What reminded you, holy shit, I could just go to a fucking meeting?
Well, what's the saying about like opportunity is or success is when preparation meets opportunity? Is that right?
That sounds right. Yeah, I think that
Okay,
sounds right.
so if
Yeah.
that's true, then your bottom or success in recovery is kind of like when your bottom meets whatever seed had been planted in your head of recovery. Because I obviously had been around the rooms, and then at 18, 19, my mom, seeing sort of my proclivity for the lifestyle, would say, come to a meeting with me, we'll just sit and then we'll go get a bite after, like sort of just nudge me into doing the right thing. So, as I said, like the seeds of recovery were planted. And when you have something like that, it'll grow into a forest of truth that you really eventually can't ignore. So it was a 1-2 punch, right? I was utterly over it. I was out of options. I tried it my own way. And then I had this glaring sort of truth that I had always known might be the way for me. And now it was the only house on the block. But what I say in the book, which was really the thing that stays with me every day throughout the last 14 years, was I walked into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you didn't tell me what was wrong with me. You told me what was wrong with you, and I identified. Because for so long, I figured I'm reasonably articulate and I can't tell you what's going on with me. Like, I can't quite diagnose it. All I can tell you is if you had my head on your shoulders, you'd drink too. But suddenly, these people, they're telling my story and they think the way I do, they drank the way I did, but they weren't a glum lot. These were people who were like smiling and taking the piss out of each other and laughing at each other's transgressions. And they also had nice cars in the parking lot and had families and careers. And suddenly it became possible that you could have this thing that I'd had my whole life and live by the social contract. And that was the biggest revelation of my life, the most pivotal moment of my whole life.
Right. It's like it's one of the best cliches. Like they say it at my meeting all the time, which is I got drunk alone, but we get sober together. And like and this morning reading the first tradition that it all depends on unity. You know what I mean? Like and what that's what you're talking about. And there's so many people that listen to Dopey that hate 12 step. They
Really?
hate 12 step, they hate God because it didn't work for them. You know what I mean? And like
That's
and they're
okay.
trying
Yeah,
to
sure.
find there's so many paths to take. It's like I 12 steps saved my life, and I found exactly what you're talking about, that fellowship, that camaraderie, that ability to lean on each other in this amazing way. Like for me, I see it like IKEA. Like I couldn't build a table without really easy instructions. Like I need someone to help me build this shit.
Yeah, imagine if you walked around your whole life feeling like you had this impediment with you, and someone says, I've figured out how to have an incredible life, how to jump and soar with this limp you have. You'd be like, well, tell me everything. And that's what it was for me. But to all those people who aren't into 12 step, and I get it, I would say, look, the reality is addiction's winning. It's been winning forever. It'll always win. I mean, there's no actuaries in recovery, but a small percentage of people who try to get sober stay sober. So whether it's 12 step or religion or therapy or whatever way you find, or yoga, like my hat's off to you. I think it's all fantastic.
Exactly. I mean, it's like basically whatever gets you through the night, and then like whatever is sustainable and whatever keeps you happy. 100%. One of my favorite things you wrote about in the book was, even though I don't love Sir Ben's, Brooklyn accent, I love him
Fair.
telling you to seek apostles. What do you think about Sir Ben's accent? You didn't find it distracting at all, honestly? A little
I
bit
probably
distracting?
had such googly eyes for him the
Right.
whole movie that I was like, oh, I'll take you in your so-so accent.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But talk about the apostle thing, because I think that can benefit the listeners. I think that's a beautiful idea.
On the last day of shooting with Sir Ben, I asked him for some advice because I figured I'd never have the chance again. And I'm always looking for a father figure, let's be honest. And instead of giving me the secrets on how to be a movie star, he was like, find your apostles, find people who better you, who really have. I guess the best way would be to say people who you can win with, people that can be there for you in moments of sorrow. And if you find yourself in a room of people who you don't feel that way about, leave immediately. And I found that to be really true. It was the advice that I needed. I didn't know it at the time, but now I always say, like, an apostle is someone who's willing to hurt your feelings in an effort to do what's best for you. And I say, if you're wondering who the last apostle in your life is, think about a person who told you something that you knew was right, but you didn't want to hear. Because my reaction to an apostle is always, screw you, I'm the worst. You're probably right, but it's too late. Fuck it, I'll do it.
Right, right, right. I love that, and I think that's useful to people who are struggling to like look for those people. And I also, you had this incredible resurgence, and I know it's like this weird feeling in you, like, because you wanted to be. I have a plan, by the way. I have a plan for you and me. You want to hear my
Okay.
plan? Before we get into
Please.
your incredible renaissance in social media, influencing, making crazy money, and having millions of followers, I have a plan, okay? After Chris died, This American Life did a special about us, and it was this big fucking deal, right?
Oh, wow.
And that's why Dopey got someplace, why Dopey is kind of like listened to and whatever, because This American Life got us a bunch of listens, whatever. They wanted to do a movie about Dopey, and we had signed a deal, shopping deal, whatever. Nothing came of it, and they were like, "Well, who do you want to play you?" And I was like, "I don't." The only person I could think of was Jason Segel from whatever.
He's
but
good.
You could play me. You could play young me really well. And we could do a fucking Dopey movie. You can produce it. I will write it, and it'll be fucking hardcore. You work at Katz's? Doesn't this sound like a dream role?
Sounds pretty good. I'm down to chat about it. Actually sounds pretty awesome. I mean, and look, even if we develop it, if Jason Segel's available, I'll
No,
bow
he's
out,
too
baby.
old. He's too old. You could play 34-year-old me and younger. I mean, you're better
Right.
looking than me. You're skinnier. Your nose isn't as big, but you can pull it off. You got a little bit of a similar thing. I
Look,
think you could do
we
it.
got we got that Katz's energy. We got that BKE, which is nice and an honor.
Big Cat's energy. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah.
All right. And now, and you're this, I mean, like, also, I need fucking help. My social media is in the toilet. How did you do it? How did you become this mogul? I didn't even know what Vine was, but I was like strung out on heroin when Vine was big. So I don't even know. But how did it happen? How did you become this big shot in social media? And what does it torment you still, or you feel good about it?
No, I mean, I feel lucky now that social media has allowed me to have a life and security in a way that acting never afforded me. Not from lack of success, just because there would be so many, months or even a year or two in between jobs. And I would see so many of my fellows, other actors, who'd be in their 40s and have great resumes, but they never have a wife or kids because they were like, yeah, I never felt secure enough to like pull the trigger on that. So in 2013, I get on this app Vine, RIP. It was great. And it was like the original TikTok. And I get a couple thousand followers and then a couple 100,000. And I remember there was this moment where I could have either really leaned in or probably just like walked away and no one would have remembered. And my buddy, another apostle in my life, Rami, who was working in social media, was like, listen, don't let anyone tell you they know what this is, because I work in it and even I don't know. But I'll tell you, being able to affect a couple 100,000 people, finding out what they like and don't like and everything in between, that's powerful. So do this, do it every day. And I leaned in, and it soon became that I was the number one person on Vine. And then eventually it moved to Instagram and YouTube. And a year later, all these Fortune 500 companies began to advertise on social media, and it never stopped. But the beauty was that I wasn't at the mercy of the gatekeepers anymore. My whole life, 5 people had to sign off on me getting one job. And now I could go directly to my audience in a way that I never could before, as long as I didn't have an ego about creating and just knew that my job is to create, whether it's for my iPhone or for an IMAX camera.
Totally. But let me ask you this, right?
Please.
I have a pittance of a following. You have 11 million Instagram followers. I have like 12,000. Like when I get likes, I feel liked. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like when I get likes, I feel like I'm enough. I'm worth something. And when I don't, I don't. So like how do you as an addict, as a food addict, as a drug addict, as an alcoholic, how do you deal with social media validation and that experience? Do you feel the addicty thing?
I mean, I'm so lucky that I'm married and as far as social media goes, I'm an elder statesman, right? Being 35 years old, like I got into it a bit later in life. So it certainly could have had a hold on me. I think what it would trigger for me when social media, like a post wouldn't do well, perhaps, that I think, oh no, this confirms my worst suspicion that this, like all things, is fleeting and I'm going to F this up, right? Because as an addict, my mind is always, all I need is one small seed of, hi, kitty.
You want a cat, by the way? I'll ship the cat to California right now.
I
if
can't
you're
believe
interested.
you're as Jewish as me and not allergic.
I'm sure I'm allergic. My hatred. If you knew how much I hate the cat, you would. I would like to cut up the cat into pieces and ship it to you. No,
Wife, is it the wife's cat?
No, it's I guess it's my daughter's cat, and
It's a good reason to have one.
The cat has mental illness, and she sprays our beds. She doesn't pee on the bed. She sprays the bed, and she sprays any bed she can, and she bites my feet in the morning, and she bites me, and we got a dog recently, right? And the dog chases the cat away. So I love the dog. I hate the cat. If you want a cat, I'm going to send you the cat. You can get the cat as part of the Dopey movie deal we're going to make. The cat.
That would be lovely. That's a good upsell.
Yeah. You don't want the cat. Nobody. I wanted to put the cat in the bag and throw the bag in the bay. That was what was going to happen for the cat.
You giving me that cat is just like murder on layaway. Like you're gonna make it. It's setting up murder on a payment plan because within 6 to 12 days I'll be dead.
Do you're that allergic?
I mean, I'm at a baseline, Ashkenazi allergy symptoms. Yeah.
I don't know why. I wish I was more allergic to the cat, and I wish I didn't actually like the cat. I just like, it's the cat you love to hate. So what about people? You have a little kid. You have a little son.
I do. Yeah, 3-year-old.
do you have any concerns about social media addiction in the world? Like that feeling that, like, I mean, like my daughter, like we don't let her do any, I mean, like she does YouTube. I think her YouTube does better than Dopey YouTube. You know, it's like, it's fucking annoying. But, what are your concerns in terms of social media and addiction, if you have any?
No, I think, look, again, I think my son is having the role of the genetic dice is that he's got just as much chance as I would imagine anyone else, but he also is in a much different sort of family system. I mean, look, growing up, in many ways, I was overpaid. Like, I was deeply loved and deeply cared for by one great parent, and some people have two, and they both suck. It all depends. But my situation is so different than his that I don't feel the need to be proactively one way or the other. I just feel like if I ever see him sort of veering off in a certain direction, I can make him aware of certain things, maybe a little better than a parent that wasn't well educated in addiction and whatnot. So I'm not too worried.
But your mom was well versed. But what about just social media as addictive in general?
I haven't had to cross that bridge yet. I mean, I see it now. Like my son watches, Sesame Street and Blippi and a fair amount of like kids programming, but we watch it on TV because we did the iPad for a minute and he became obsessed, like immediate personality change because it was too quick. With the TV, we control it on the remote. He's forced to sort of be at our speed. And the iPad was just like, if he can pick and he can switch a show every 13 seconds, it was too much for his little baby brain.
No, I get it.
Too triggering.
We're trying to take devices away from the children. Dude, I appreciate your time so much. I mean, like, is this one of the greatest podcasts you've ever been on besides The Echo then? You've been on a lot of podcasts.
I think absolutely. Other than this Fakakta Echo, what is this program you use? I've never seen it before.
It's Howie. Howie, get on the screen. This is the most Jewish person in the world. And he set this thing up. Howie, tell him it's your fault.
No, it isn't.
Meet Josh.
Hello, Josh.
Hi, Howie. How are you?
Hey, it's Dave's fault, 100%.
How?
I'm just sitting around. And the interview was great.
No, but Howie set this up. It's called Ecamm.
Yeah.
We don't want to do Zoom because we don't like the way it looks, and there's always a weird sound problem.
Might have
How
to
do you
switch.
do? How do you do remote interviews?
I don't, because me and my buddy, it's just like a comedy podcast, Male Model. So it's just a hangout pod we do in person. And it's only audio, so we don't have to worry about the video component. But yeah, this was the only one I've ever had echo on.
See, it's totally fucking Howie's fault. I always did this audio, and I would do it on the phone, and it would sound like a phone call. But Howie had this great ambition to turn this into a video show, and he knows this platform called Ecamm. Every time, either I have the lag or you have the lag, and I might have to kill the cat and then kill Howard. I think
No, Howie is a gem. I can already tell. And as long as you guys are happy with it, great. And if you ever want to do it again, I'm in.
And I would also love to send you a care package from Katzs, so I'll write you.
Oh my gosh, that beyond. I'm in.
All right, I got you. Thank you so much.
All right,
Josh.
don't be
You were
mad at
fucking
Howie.
awesome.
We love you, Howie.
Howie fucks. He ruins the whole show every time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Josh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
Thanks,
man.
guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I'm face down on the floor. No, baby, this second I have some more. No, baby. Said no, baby.